The knock came like a ghost against the storm. Soft, hesitant, but sharp enough to cut through the roar of rain against the cabin walls. Bear McAllister froze where he sat, one calloused hand resting on the butt of the old Colt at his hip, the other around the chipped coffee mug that had long since gone cold. He lived too far from town, too far from any road worth traveling in such weather, for a visitor to arrive unannounced, especially this deep into Apache country. Another knock. Louder. Urgent. The lantern light threw long shadows across the pine plank floor as Bear stood, his boots heavy, his breath slower than he wanted it to be. He hadn't opened that door for anyone in near 2 years, not since the war took his brothers and the land took his wife. When the third knock rattled the wood, he swung it open, and there she was, a girl, maybe 17, maybe younger, half soaked in the storm, dark hair plastered across her cheeks. Her dress was torn at the hem, her shoes caked in mud, and her eyes, wide and hollow, carried the kind of desperation a man doesn't forget once he's seen it. "Just one night," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, just one night of shelter. But let's go back to where it all started." The year was 1872, and the territory of Arizona was nothing but dust, gun smoke, and silence where good men tried to plant roots. Bear McAllister had once been such a man, though these days he lived more like the mountains he clung to, quiet, jagged, hard to approach. He had fought under Sheridan back in the war, and what he saw in Virginia had followed him west. The blood, the fire, the way neighbors turned on neighbors. He told himself he came to Arizona to ranch, to rebuild what the world had burned. But in truth, he had come to disappear. His cabin sat on a rise above a dry wash, half hidden among cottonwoods and juniper. The land was rough, stubborn, but Bear liked it that way. A man could break himself trying to tame such ground, and breaking was what he deserved. The townsfolk of San Miguel knew of him but little else. Some said he'd killed a dozen men before he ever wore a blue coat. Others swore he had Apache blood himself, though one look at his gray eyes and Scottish jawline would have set that rumor to rest. Truth was, they didn't know because he didn't let them. He kept to his cattle, his horse, his whiskey, and the rest he left to silence. But silence never lasts forever in the West. It started the way trouble always does, with whispers. Apache. Raids up north. A rancher's boy taken from the creek. Soldiers riding heavy out of Fort Bowie. Bear listened when he had to, but he kept to himself. "Not my fight," he'd mutter and pour another drink. But deep down, he knew what the soldiers never admitted. Every raid had a reason, every fire a story, every dead man another man's justice. One evening, while mending fence in the low, Light Bear caught sight of something across the ridgeline, a curl of smoke against the dying sun. Too small for a camp, too steady for lightning fire. He narrowed his eyes, watching until the wind carried it away. He told himself it was nothing, but his stomach told him otherwise. The rain came that night, one of those desert storms that don't knock politely but tear the sky wide open, drenching the earth in minutes. Bear lit a lantern, poured coffee, and listened to the thunder roll like cannon fire across the basin. That was when the knock came, and when he opened the door, the storm wasn't the only thing that changed his life. The Laupoer girl stood there shaking, her lips nearly blue. She looked at him as though he held her fate in the rough palm of his hand. "Please," she said again. "Hey friends, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments which city and country you're watching from." Bear's first thought wasn't noble. It was survival. A girl like that doesn't just wander into a man's cabin unless something worse is chasing her. An angry husband? A posse? Or worse yet, an Apache war party tracking a runaway. He glanced past her into the storm. No figures, no torches, just the endless sheets of rain washing down the slope. Still his jaw tightened. He thought of San Miguel, of how the townsfolk already muttered when he came in for supplies, how Sheriff Colton eyed him like a man waiting to be proven right. What would they say if word got out Bear McAllister was harboring some runaway girl? But then she swayed in the doorway, her knees near buckling. He caught her by the arm before she fell. Her skin was cold as riverstone. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Just for the night." He pulled her inside, shut the door against the storm, and knew, deep down, nothing about his life would ever be quiet again. For a long while neither spoke. The girl sat near the fire, her damp dress steaming, her gaze locked on the flames like she feared they might go out. Bear moved about the cabin, clattering dishes just to fill the silence. Finally, he asked, "What's your name?" She didn't answer. "You got family nearby?" He tried again. Her eyes flicked to him, wary, then back to the fire. He sighed, scratching at the beard that had grown wild since spring. He wasn't used to company, much less a half-frozen stranger, with secrets stitched into her silence. It wasn't until he set a plate of beans and cornbread in front of her that she spoke, so soft he almost missed it. "Clara." Bear nodded once. A name was something. Not much, but enough to start with. The storm outside howled through the night, rain lashing the shutters, wind moaning across the chimney. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than it ever had. 2 souls, one carrying scars, the other secrets. And though Bear told himself he'd send her on her way at first light, he knew the world outside wasn't done knocking. Not by a long shot. And when it came, it would test the last piece of goodness left in him. Morning came slow, gray, and heavy, the storm having left the land washed clean yet unsettled, as though the earth itself still carried a tremor in its chest. Bear McAllister stepped out onto the porch, his boots sinking into damp red mud. The desert air smelled sharp with juniper and wet clay. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried over the basin. Inside the cabin, the girl still slept near the hearth, curled, beneath one of his old army blankets. Her chest rose and fell with the deep rhythm of exhaustion, though now and then her brow twitched, as if the nightmares pursued her even in rest. Bear rubbed the back of his neck. He'd told himself at least a dozen times through the night. First light, he'd see her gone. Give her bread for the road, point her toward San Miguel and wash his hands of it. But when he looked at her now, gaunt and pale, her cheeks hollow, from more than one hungry night, he knew she wouldn't last half the day alone out there. He cursed under his breath. A man doesn't invite trouble into his home if he means to live quiet. And yet, here trouble was, wearing a young woman's face. By midday, Clara stirred awake. She ate the beans he set before her in small, guarded bites, as if unsure when her next meal might come. She avoided his gaze until he finally spoke. "You from San Miguel?" A small shake of her head. "Fort Bowie?" Another shake. Then where? Her lips parted, but whatever words she meant to give tangled themselves in her throat. She looked toward the window, the hills rolling beyond. Finally, almost inaudible, "East." Bear frowned. East could mean anything. New Mexico, Texas, or even further if she'd been running long enough. "You got kin waiting for you?" A pause. No. It was all she would give. Bear leaned back, chair creaking. He could push her, demand answers, but something in her eyes stopped him. Not defiance, but fear stitched so tight it made her seem older than she was. "Listen, girl," he said finally, voice low. "Whatever you're running from, it ain't gonna stay run. Men don't give up easy. You best tell me now if there's a husband coming after you, or lawmen, or—" He hesitated, the word heavy in his mouth. "Apache." At that, she flinched. Just a flicker, but enough. Bear's jaw hardened. That one look told him more than any confession would. If the Apaches were involved, then this was no small matter. That evening, Bear saddled his horse and rode into San Miguel for supplies. He hadn't planned to speak of Clara, and he didn't. But small towns have a way of sniffing out secrets faster than hounds. Inside the mercantile, Sheriff Colton leaned against the counter, hat low over his brow. He was a big man, broad, across the shoulders with the kind of easy smile that never reached his eyes. "McAllister," he drawled. "Storm catch you last night?" Bear nodded. "Cabin held." "Good. Colton thumbed at his belt. You hear the news? Couple settlers out by Dry Creek claim they seen an Apache girl, young one, sneaking through the brush last evening. Said she looked near starved. Bear's heart thudded once, slow and heavy. He kept his face stone. Plenty of shadows out there in a storm. Folks see what they want. Colton studied him, long and deliberate. Maybe so. But if it's true, you best keep your rifle close. Apache don't let go of their young easy. If she ran, they'll come, and when they come, he let the words hang. The mercantile went quiet, all eyes on the sheriff. Colton finally smiled that same thin smile and clapped Bear on the shoulder. You take care out there, McAllister. Bear rode home with more than flour and coffee in his saddlebags. He carried a weight now heavier than lead. The knowledge that if Clara was who he feared she was, keeping her meant inviting a storm no roof could withstand. That night, the firelight flickered across Clara's face as she sat at the table, her hands folded tight. Bear set the sack of flour down harder than he meant to. You didn't tell me the whole of it, he said flat. She looked up, startled. What? Don't play, Bear cut in. Sheriff's already heard. Apache girl spotted near Dry Creek. You expect me to believe it's a coincidence you turned up at my door same night? Her breath quickened. For a long moment she said nothing. Then in a voice like cracked glass, I'm not Apache. Bear's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me. I'm not, she insisted, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. My mother was Mexican. My father... She stopped, swallowed hard. Apache. The words hung like a church bell after the strike. Bear sank back, rubbing his face. Half-blood. In the territory, that was enough to earn the hate of both worlds. To the soldiers, she'd be Apache. To the Apache, she'd be something worse. A betrayal. Why'd you run? He asked finally. Her eyes glossed, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a breath. Because if I stayed, I wouldn't have lived. And if I died there, nobody would have cared. For the first time, Bear felt something shift in his chest. Not anger, not suspicion, but a faint echo of the same hollow ache that had driven him west years before. Running, searching, burying the pieces of himself no one else wanted. He stood, paced the floorboards. He should take her to town, hand her to the sheriff, wash his hands before the Apache came knocking. But then he remembered the cold weight of her arm when she'd near collapsed in his doorway. The fear in her eyes. The truth in her voice when she said nobody would have cared. Bear's hand tightened on the back of the chair. Damn it, he muttered. Clara watched him, silent as though waiting for the verdict that would decide her fate. Finally, he said, You stay here. For now. But you follow my rules, understand? Her eyes widened. She nodded fast, relief breaking across her face in a way that made her look far younger. Bear knew what he'd just done. He'd crossed the line between quiet survival and dangerous compassion. And in the Arizona territory of 1872, that kind of mercy could cost a man his land, his life, or worse, his soul. The following days, word spread in town like wildfire in dry grass. Whispers of an Apache girl, rumors of who might be hiding her. A few men muttered Bear's name. By the time Sheriff Colton came riding up the ridge with 2 deputies, Bear knew his decision hadn't just changed Clara's life. It had changed his. The morning Sheriff Colton rode up the ridge. The desert was quiet in that way that warns a man something is watching. No birdsong, no rabbit tracks in the wash, just the still air and the faint smell of smoke riding in from some faraway fire. Bear McAllister stepped off the porch, rifle in hand but barrel low, as 3 horses crested the rise. Colton led, tall in the saddle, his deputies riding close. Dust clung to their coats even after the rain, like they'd been on the trail since dawn. McAllister, Colton called, his voice carrying like a gavel. Bear leaned against the post, calm on the outside, though his stomach was tight. Sheriff. The deputies scanned the cabin, the barn, the hills. One of them spat into the mud. Colton reined in close, his eyes sharp beneath the brim. Words travelin', folks seen tracks, small ones, barefoot, headin' this way. Now you got something to tell me? Bear said nothing. Silence was safer than lies. Colton studied him. See, I don't much care what you do up here, Bear. You want to drink yourself into the grave, that's your business. But harboring an Apache girl, that's different. You know what that means if her people come looking. Bear's jaw tightened. She's just a girl. She's Apache, Colton snapped, his easy drawl gone. And Apache, don't forget. You think you're saving her, but what you're really doing is painting a target on every soul in this valley. Men, women, children. He leaned in, voice low. You want that on your conscience? Bear looked past him, toward the horizon where the mountains rose black and jagged against the morning sky. He thought of Clara inside, her thin frame curled, beneath the blanket, clinging to the little piece she'd found. I'll handle it, he said at last. Colton's smile was thin as a knife. That's the problem, McAllister, you can't. He wheeled his horse, signaled the deputies, and they rode off down the slope, dust trailing behind. But as Bear watched them go, he knew this wasn't finished. Colton would be back, and not alone. That night, Clara stood by the window staring at the dark hills beyond the wash. Her face was pale in the lamplight. They'll come, she whispered. Bear set his rifle against the wall. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Her voice was steady now, stripped of the tremble it carried before. If they believe I betrayed them, they will come, and they will not stop. Bear's gut twisted. He had known Apache raids in his soldier days, the suddenness of them, the precision. Not wild savages like the newspapers claimed, but warriors who fought with a purpose, who struck fast and left nothing standing. How many? He asked. She hesitated. Enough. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it a sound that made Bear's blood chill, a distant drumbeat, faint like thunder behind the mountains. He went still. You hear that? Clara nodded, eyes wide. It's not thunder. The following days passed in a haze of unease. Bear worked the ranch with his rifle never out of reach. Clara stayed close to the cabin, her gaze always toward the ridges, as though expecting shapes to appear. In San Miguel, tension boiled. Bear overheard whispers when he came for supplies. Apache girl's hiding with McAllister. He's lost his damn mind. Sheriff'll have to smoke him out if he won't give her up. Even the preacher's voice on Sunday carried weight. A man must choose between his own soul and the safety of his neighbors. Protecting evil makes you part of it. By the third day, Bear noticed smoke on the horizon again. This time thicker, blacker, drifting from the north. He knew what it meant. A warning. A signal. That evening, as the sun bled red across the desert, hoofbeats thundered down the ridge. Not soldiers, not deputies, a mob. Bear stepped outside as 10 men rode up. Ranchers, townsfolk, even the blacksmith. Torches flared in their hands, rifles strapped across saddles. Sheriff Colton sat at the head. McAllister, Colton barked. Time's up. Hand her over. Bear's heart hammered. Clara appeared at the doorway behind him, her face pale, eyes wide. No, Bear said, voice steady though his blood roared in his ears. Colton's face darkened. You damn fool. Do you know what's at stake? They're coming. And when they do, it won't just be you they kill, it'll be all of us. The mob murmured agreement, voices rough with fear. One man shouted, If he won't give her up, we'll take her. Bear's hand went to his rifle. Not raised, not yet, but resting there, clear enough for all to see. Try it, he growled. The standoff hung heavy in the cooling air. Torches crackled, horses stamped, men muttered. Colton's gaze locked on Bear's, searching for weakness. Finally, he spat in the dirt. Fine. You want to protect her? You protect her. But when they come, don't expect San Miguel to bleed for your mistake. He turned his horse. The others followed, though their eyes lingered with hate and fear. As the mob disappeared down the ridge, Clara whispered from the doorway, You shouldn't have done that. Bear turned to her, his face hard but his eyes softer. Girl, I already did. And as night fell, the drums carried louder across the basin, no longer faint, no longer far, The Apache were coming, and Bear McAllister knew dawn might not bring light, only fire. The drums carried through the night like a heartbeat, from the mountains, slow at first, then steady, relentless. Bear McAllister sat at the table, rifle across his knees, lantern light throwing hard shadows across the cabin walls. Clara sat opposite him, hands folded tight, knuckles white. Neither had spoken for a long time. Finally, Bear broke the silence. "They'll come at dawn." Clara nodded, though her eyes glistened. "They'll come before. Apache don't wait for the sun." Bear studied her, really studied her. The dark hair, the sharp cheekbones, the fire in her eyes that even fear couldn't put out. She was young, yes, but there was an oldness in her too, the kind that comes from seeing too much too soon. "Tell me," he said quietly, "why'd you run?" Clara's breath caught. For a moment she shook her head, lips pressed tight. But then, with the drums pulsing in the distance like truth itself demanding to be spoken, she whispered, "My father wanted me to marry." Bear said nothing, waiting. "Not just any man," she went on, her voice cracking. "A warrior, older, powerful. He said it would keep peace between families. But She swallowed hard. "I didn't want him. I didn't want that life. I wanted to be free, to choose." Bear leaned back, staring at the fire. He remembered another girl, not Apache, not half-blood, but his own Mary. The way she had begged him not to go to war, not to leave her behind. He'd chosen duty, and when he returned, the fever had already taken her. She hadn't been given a choice. He set his rifle aside and poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one across the table. Clara stared at it, then at him. "You think they'll forgive me?" she asked. Bear shook his head. "They'll forgive you or they won't. Question is, can you forgive yourself?" Clara's eyes shimmered. "For what?" "For wanting something better," he said simply. Her lips trembled, and for the first time since she'd come, she let herself cry. Silent tears rolling down her cheeks, dropping onto the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Bear didn't move to comfort her, didn't know how. But he let her weep, because sometimes the only kindness a man can give is the space to hurt. Later, the storm outside gathered again, though no rain fell. Just the restless wind and the drums, louder now. Clara had fallen asleep against the wall, her breathing uneven. Bear stood at the small shelf above the hearth, eyes drifting over the objects there. A worn Bible, a silver locket that had belonged to Mary, and beside it, a tin-type photograph. Mary's face, smiling faintly, holding their son. A boy Bear never got to raise. Fever had taken them both. He picked up the photo, thumb tracing the edges. Clara stirred, watching him. "Your family?" she asked softly. Bear nodded. His voice caught when he tried to answer. He forced the words out anyway. "Used to be." She rose, came closer, peering at the photograph. "They're beautiful." Bear swallowed hard. They were. Silence stretched between them. Then Clara, almost in a whisper, said, "You loved them." It wasn't a question. Bear set the photo back, staring into the fire. More than breath. Clara's eyes filled again. She looked at him not as a stranger, not as a protector, but as something else, a man carrying a grief that mirrored her own. "You still do," she said. Bear's throat worked. He wanted to deny it, to bury it like he had for years. But the truth was too raw, too close to the surface tonight. He nodded once sharply. "Yes, I still do." Clara reached out, her hand hesitating before resting lightly on his scarred knuckles. Just a touch. But it broke something in him he hadn't known was still holding. In that moment, it wasn't a runaway girl and a broken rancher. It was 2 souls, both unwanted in their own way, finding a brief place to belong. The sound came sudden, slicing through the fragile quiet. A coyote's cry, long, high, followed by 3 sharp echoes from the ridge. Not coyote. A signal. Clara stiffened. They're here. Bear grabbed his rifle, moving to the door. He eased it open, the cold night wind rushing in. The moonlight spilled silver across the basin, shadows stretching long. And there, barely, visible at the tree line, figures. Still, watching, Apache scouts. Bear closed the door slowly, locking it. His jaw clenched. They're waiting, testing us. Clara's voice shook. They want me alive. Bear glanced at her. And if they can't have you? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Hours crawled by, the cabin tight with silence and fear. The fire burned low. Bear sat by the door, rifle across his lap, while Clara lay curled on the cot, her eyes open, staring into the dark. At some point near dawn, she spoke, her voice fragile but steady. You should give me to them. Bear turned, startled. If I go, they'll leave you. The town. Everyone. She swallowed. It's me they want. Bear's face hardened. You don't know that. I do, she whispered. And it's true. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. Maybe it's better that way. Bear's chest burned, the old soldier in him rising. He'd heard those words before, from dying men who wanted to be left on the battlefield, from his wife when fever racked her body. Better that way. No, he said firmly. Clara's eyes filled. Why not? Why risk everything for me? Bear's grip tightened on the rifle. He looked at her long, then spoke with a rawness he hadn't shown another soul in years. Because I already lost everyone I ever loved, Clara, and I ain't about to sit here and let the world take one more, not while I'm breathing. Her lips parted, a soft sound escaping, half sob, half breath. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. And Bear, for the first time in a long time, felt something stir in his chest that wasn't anger, or grief, or whiskey. It was the faint, painful flicker of hope. Outside, the drums ceased. The silence that followed was worse. Heavy. Expectant. Bear knew what it meant. The Apache were done waiting. The choice had arrived. And there, in the stillness before the storm, Clara lifted her head, tears shining on her cheeks. If we die tonight, she whispered, at least I'll have died with someone who cared. Bear looked at her, his weathered face etched with both pain and resolve. He reached across the table, rough hand closing around hers. No, he said, voice steady as the steel of his rifle. We ain't dying tonight. Not if I've got anything to say about it. Outside, the first war cries split the dawn. The first war cry ripped the dawn apart like a blade through canvas. Then came another, and another. From the ridges, Apache warriors emerged, painted and silent no longer, their figures cut sharp against the pale morning sky, horses stamping, lances gleaming. There weren't hundreds, maybe a dozen, maybe more hidden in the brush. But to a man defending a cabin, numbers didn't matter. It was enough to swallow them whole. Bear McAllister stood in the doorway, rifle steady, every nerve on fire. Clara crouched behind him, her breath ragged, her hands clutched tight at her chest. They want me, she whispered. Bear's jaw tightened. They'll take you over my grave. The warriors circled, torches in hand. They didn't charge, not yet. They were waiting, watching, testing. One rider broke forward, tall, fierce, with a necklace of bear claws and a scar running across his cheek. His horse snorted clouds into the chill morning. The man raised his spear, then pointed. It straight at the cabin, Clara gasped. That's him. Who? My father. Bear's stomach turned. The scarred warrior's eyes locked with Clara's, sharp as flint, unyielding as stone. He shouted something in Apache, words that cut like the strike of an axe. Clara translated, through trembling lips. He says I belong to them, to him. Bear's rifle never wavered. Tell him no. Clara shook her head. If I say no, he'll burn us alive. The scarred warrior shouted again, raising his arm. The others behind him echoed the cry. the valley filling with a thunder of voices. Bear leaned close to Clara. "You trust me?" Her wide eyes met his. "Yes." He swallowed hard. "Then stay behind me, no matter what." The warriors surged forward, circling the cabin. Arrows thudded into the walls. Torches flared against the roof beams. Bear fired once, the crack echoing through the basin. A horse reared, a rider fell. The others shouted, scattering wider. Smoke thickened. Clara coughed, clutching her sleeve to her mouth. Bear grabbed a bucket, dousing the flames licking at the porch. But for every fire he smothered, 2 more sparked. He knew he couldn't hold them off forever. Suddenly, a voice rang sharp and clear in Apache, cutting through the chaos. Clara had stepped out from behind him, standing in the open doorway, her small frame backlit by firelight. "Clara!" Bear shouted, reaching for her. But she raised her hand. The warriors froze, watching. Even her father pulled his horse to a halt, spear still raised but no longer advancing. Clara spoke rapidly, her words fierce, desperate. Bear caught only fragments through the smoke and noise, but her tone carried something that cut deeper than any rifle. Truth. She pointed to herself, then to Bear. Her voice broke but held firm. "This man cared for me," she cried in their tongue. "When you would not. When you would give me away like cattle. He gave me bread, water, shelter. He did not see Apache or white. He saw me." The circle of warriors murmured, uneasy. Father barked a command, his face like stone. Clara shook her head, tears streaking her soot-stained cheeks. "If you kill him, you kill me too. And then you are no better than the soldiers who kill without asking why." The silence that followed was deafening. Only the crackle of flames and the restless shifting of horses broke it. Bear's chest tightened. He had seen battlefields where men cried out with rage, but this was something else. The raw courage of a girl standing unarmed before her father's wrath. The scarred warrior dismounted slowly, his boots sinking into the mud. He strode toward the cabin, spear lowered but not thrown. The other warriors held back, watching, waiting. Bear raised his rifle instinctively but Clara stepped in front of him. Her father stopped a few feet away, towering over her. His face was a storm, fury, pride, pain. He spoke low, a growl. Clara answered, voice trembling but unbroken. Then she did something that stunned them all. She reached for Bear's hand, held it tight, and lifted it for her father to see. The meaning was clear. A choice made. The scarred warrior's eyes burned. He raised his spear high. Bear tensed, ready to fire, but the strike never came. Instead, with a guttural cry, the warrior slammed the spear into the mud, splintering the shaft in 2. Gasps rippled through the warriors. Some bowed their heads. Others looked away. Her father turned, his shoulders heavy, and mounted his horse. Again, he barked a final command, and slowly, one by one, the warriors withdrew into the hills, their drums fading with them. The basin fell silent once more. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with smoke and silence. Bear sat heavily on the chair, rifle across his knees, staring at the floorboards. Clara stood beside him, her hands still trembling, her face streaked with ash and tears. "You saved us," Bear said hoarsely. She shook her head. "No, you did. You gave me a place to stand. Without that..." Her voice cracked. "I would have gone back. I would have died there." Bear looked up at her, and for the first time in years, his eyes softened with something he thought long buried. Hope. Clara smiled faintly through her tears. Then she glanced at the photograph on the shelf. Mary and the boy. She picked it up gently, cradling it like a sacred thing. "She's beautiful," she whispered again. "I think she would be glad you opened your door." Bear's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. The cabin smelled of smoke. The roof blackened, the night still heavy with danger. Tomorrow would bring questions, from the town, from Colton, from the world. But for now, in that fragile silence, A broken rancher and a runaway girl had found something the desert rarely gave, a reason to keep going. Weeks later, San Miguel still talked of the raid that never was, of how the Apache had come and yet turned away. Sheriff Colton kept his distance, unsettled by what he couldn't explain, and Bear McAllister? He still rode into town for supplies, still kept his silence. But now there was a girl riding beside him, a girl who'd knocked on his door in the rain and asked for just one night of shelter, and instead had opened his heart.